Step out of the vehicle. The cop's voice is dripping with authority, his smirk widening as he prepares to make yet another black driver's life miserable. But then, calmly, without a word, the driver hands him his badge. The color drains from the officer's face. His breath catches. He just harassed the most powerful man in the department. And now, the real fear begins. The rain hammers against the windshield like angry fists as Commissioner Marcus Johnson navigates the familiar streets of his city. Streetlights reflect off the wet asphalt, casting an eerie glow across his face. His first day as police commissioner, a position no black man has held in the department's 127-year history, has left him exhausted but determined. His hands grip the steering wheel tightly, the gold wedding band catching the light with each turn. 20 years ago, he'd patrolled these same streets as a rookie officer. Now, at 45, the weight of reforming an entire system rests squarely on his shoulders. Blue and red lights suddenly flash in his rearview mirror, painting the interior of his sedan in alternating colors. Marcus checks his speedometer, 5 miles under the limit. He glances at his reflection in the mirror, watching his expression shift from confusion to grim understanding. This wasn't about speed. Statistics flash through his mind as he signals and pulls over. Black drivers in this district are stopped 3 times more frequently than white drivers. He'd compiled those numbers himself as a captain, fighting for reforms that were consistently blocked by the old guard. Marcus positions his hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, visible, a lesson he'd learned as a teenager, reinforced through 20 years in uniform, and one he should be exempt from as the department's highest-ranking officer. Yet here he sits, heart rate elevating despite himself. Officer Brennan approaches with deliberate slowness, rain darkening his uniform. His hand rests unnecessarily on his holster, a direct violation of the de-escalation protocols Marcus himself had implemented last year when he was deputy commissioner. No body camera visible, another violation. The flashlight beam sweeps aggressively across the car's interior before landing directly in Marcus's eyes, a power move Marcus recognizes all too well. The light intentionally blinds, establishes dominance, creates disorientation. Classic intimidation tactics that the department officially condemned, but tacitly permitted. License and registration. The demand comes without any explanation for the stop, a third violation. Marcus doesn't immediately reach for his documents. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" His voice remains professional, measured, though tension coils in his shoulders. The officer's posture stiffens, irritation flashing across his face at being questioned. "Just hand over your documents." The flashlight beam intensifies, boring into Marcus's eyes. "I'm reaching for my registration," Marcus narrates as he moves his hand slowly toward the glove compartment, exactly what he'd taught hundreds of officers to allow civilians to do during traffic stops. "Step out of the vehicle." The command comes with unexpected aggression, Brennan's hand tightening on his holster. A smirk plays at the corner of his mouth as rain drips from his hat brim. He's enjoying this display of authority, the power to make a black man obey, regardless of the absence of cause. Without a word, Marcus retrieves his wallet. His movements are deliberate, controlled. He slides out his identification but places something else on top, his commissioner's badge. The gold shield catches the flashlight beam, reflecting light directly back into Officer Brennan's eyes. The color drains from Brennan's face. His posture transforms instantly from aggressive to uncertain. The flashlight beam wavers, then drops. "Commissioner Johnson, I didn't—" The stammered beginning of an excuse dies in his throat. "Please state the reason for this stop, Officer Brennan." Marcus's voice carries the authority of his position, calm yet unyielding. The rain continues to fall between them, creating a curtain of water that separates two worlds, the past of unchecked power and the uncertain future of accountability. This moment isn't about one racist cop facing embarrassment. It's about whether one man, even with newfound power, can truly change a system built on centuries of inequality. A system that taught Officer Brennan that his behavior was not just acceptable, but expected. The real confrontation has only begun. Morning light filters through the blinds of Marcus's new office as he scrolls through Officer Brennan's personnel file. The knot in his stomach tightens with each page. 15 civilian complaints in 8 years, all dismissed without investigation. 3 racial profiling allegations, 7 excessive force claims, 5 procedural violations, 0 disciplinary actions. Marcus rubs his temples. The system had protected Brennan at every turn, each complaint disappearing into administrative black holes. He clicks through department records. Brennan's traffic unit generates over $2 million annually in citation revenue, predominantly from stops in minority neighborhoods. A knock interrupts his thoughts. His assistant Diane enters with coffee, her expression tight. "Deputy Commissioner Reynolds is here to see you," she announces, her tone conveying volumes about the department's second in command. Reynolds enters without waiting, tall, with perfectly groomed silver hair and a custom-tailored uniform adorned with polished brass. His handshake is firm, his smile practiced, never reaching his cold blue eyes. "Marcus, getting settled in?" Reynolds gestures broadly at the office. "Listen, about that little incident last night with Officer Brennan." "You've heard already." Marcus doesn't phrase it as a question. Word travels fast. Reynolds settles uninvited into a chair. Officer Brennan is very apologetic. Embarrassed, really. Just a misunderstanding in the rain. Nothing that needs to make it into official channels. Marcus turns his monitor so Reynolds can see Brennan's complaint history. 15 misunderstandings in 8 years. Reynolds shifts uncomfortably, dropping his friendly facade. "Look, Marcus, we've known each other a long time. You've made it to the top. Congratulations. But don't make waves your first week." He leans forward, lowering his voice. "Brennan's uncle chairs the City Council Budget Committee. Our department funding comes up for review next month. The message is clear. This is how the system protects itself." That afternoon, Marcus drives to the suburbs where his old mentor lives. Retired Chief Wilson uses a cane now, but his mind remains razor-sharp. His modest living room walls display 3 generations of black police officers, grandfather, father, and Wilson himself, all trying to change things from within. "You can't fire every problem officer," Wilson advises, pouring tea with a slightly trembling hand. "The union would shut down the department, but you can change the incentives, the training, the culture, slowly." "I don't have slowly," Marcus responds, steam rising between them. "The mayor gave me a 3-year contract to show results." Wilson's eyes narrow. "Then they set you up to fail, son." Evening finds Marcus at a quiet corner table in Rosie's diner, where community activist Shanice Taylor joins him. Her organization has led protests against police violence for years. Their relationship is complicated. They dated briefly in college before career paths pulled them apart. "So, now you're inside the system you used to criticize," she observes, studying him over her coffee cup. "I can do more with this badge than without it," Marcus replies. "Can you?" Shanice challenges. "That officer who pulled you over, what happens to him?" Before Marcus can answer, his phone buzzes with a text from the mayor. "Hoping you'll handle the Brennan situation quietly. His uncle is crucial for our infrastructure bill." Simultaneously, a news alert appears. Anonymous police sources claim new commissioner targeting officers for personal vendetta. Marcus shows Shanice the screen. "It's already starting." "They'll come after you harder than this," she warns. "The system doesn't surrender power willingly." The next morning, an unmarked envelope awaits on Marcus's desk. Inside, crystal clear surveillance photos. His teenage son leaving basketball practice. His wife outside her downtown office. His elderly mother being wheeled through her nursing home garden. The threat requires no words. The message is clear. Pursue this, and your family pays the price. Across town, Officer Brennan sits at a corner table in the Blue Line bar, surrounded by fellow officers. He stares into his beer, shoulders hunched. "Don't sweat it," Officer Ramirez tells him, clapping his shoulder. "Commissioners come and go. The union will protect you." "Remember what happened to that black captain who tried changing pursuit protocols?" Officer Sullivan adds. "Took a medical leave 3 months later. Never came back." Their confidence reveals a darker truth. The system is designed to outlast reformers. It has survived decades of oversight committees, federal investigations, and civilian review boards. That night, Marcus sits alone in his home office, the threatening photos spread before him. 20 years of working within the system had earned him the highest position in the department. But now he faces an impossible choice: use his power to pursue justice and potentially endanger his family, or back down and become part of the very system he swore to transform. The rain returns, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers demanding an answer. 3 weeks later, fluorescent lights buzz overhead in the department's largest training room. Rows of officers sit in rigid formation, tension filling the air like smoke before a fire. Marcus stands at the podium, his crisp uniform a stark contrast to the sea of uncertain faces before him. In the front row sits Officer Brennan, arms folded defensively across his chest, flanked by 2 stone-faced union representatives. Deputy Commissioner Reynolds watches from the side, his expression carefully neutral, but eyes calculating. "Today we launch comprehensive departmental reform," Marcus announces, his voice echoing in the silent room. His words land like stones in still water, ripples of discomfort visible across the audience. "Every officer will undergo mandatory implicit bias training. Body cameras will be operational during all civilian interactions, no exceptions. Non-operational cameras will result in immediate suspension without pay." Murmurs erupt across the room. Marcus raises his hand, commanding silence. "Additionally, we're implementing new traffic stop protocols. Officers must state the reason for stops immediately upon approach and request documentation only after providing that explanation." Marcus's eyes find Brennan's. "And all precincts will undergo statistical review for racial disparities in enforcement patterns." The room erupts. Some officers stand in protest, others remain seated, expressions unreadable. The union representatives whisper frantically to each other, already strategizing resistance. "This isn't punitive," Marcus continues when the noise subsides. "This is who we promised to be when we took our oaths." His voice strengthens with each word. "This department will protect and serve everyone equally, or it will be rebuilt from the ground up." After the presentation, Reynolds corners Marcus in the hallway, his friendly facade completely abandoned. "You're forcing a confrontation you can't win," he hisses, glancing around to ensure they're not overheard. "The union's already preparing a vote of no confidence. You'll be gone within a month." "Let them," Marcus replies steadily. "The mayor supports these reforms." Reynolds's smile turns predatory. "The mayor supports whatever keeps her approval ratings up. One viral video of crime increasing under your watch, and she'll throw you to the wolves." That evening, Marcus finds Shanice waiting beside his car in the dimly lit parking garage, her breath visible in the cold air. "Heard about your reforms," she says. "Bold move." "Not bold enough for you, I imagine," he responds, exhaustion evident in his voice. "Actually," she hands him a flash drive. "This might help. We've been collecting civilian videos of traffic stops for years. Patterns, Marcus. Evidence of targeted harassment by specific units, including Brennan's. Things that never made it into official complaints because people knew nothing would happen." Before he can respond, footsteps echo through the concrete structure. Officer Brennan approaches, his gait unsteady, blocking their path to the exit. "This who you're working with now, Commissioner?" "Street activists?" Brennan's voice is slurred. The smell of whiskey hangs in the air between them. "Go home, officer," Marcus orders firmly. "You're not fit for duty." "You think you can change everything because you got lucky? Made it to the top?" Brennan steps closer, invading Marcus's space. "You're still just a—" He stops himself from completing the racial slur, but his meaning hangs in the air like poison gas. "Finish that sentence," Shanice challenges, already recording with her phone. Brennan lunges for her phone, but Marcus steps between them. "Officer Brennan, you're suspended effective immediately. Surrender your badge and weapon." "You can't do that!" Brennan shouts, spittle flying from his lips. "I just did." Marcus stands firm despite the pounding of his heart. "And your body camera is still off. Another violation." Brennan's face contorts with rage. For a terrifying moment, his hand moves toward his holster, then stops as security cameras whir in their direction. The garage falls silent, except for Brennan's heavy breathing. "This department destroyed my father," Marcus says quietly, breaking the silence. "He was the first black officer in this precinct. Made it to sergeant before the stress killed him. Heart attack at 45. He died fighting the same battles I'm fighting now." Marcus steps closer to Brennan. "I won't let it destroy another generation." Something shifts in the atmosphere. The personal revelation lands differently than policy announcements. Several officers who have gathered to watch the confrontation exchange uncomfortable glances. "This isn't about punishing you, Brennan," Marcus continues. "It's about fixing a broken system that taught you this behavior was acceptable. You can be part of the solution or part of the problem." Later that night, Marcus sits alone in his office reviewing Shanice's evidence. Dozens of videos showing the same pattern of discriminatory stops. His phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. "Parking level 3, now." Against better judgment, Marcus goes. He finds not a threat, but 6 officers waiting, including some of the department's most respected veterans. Their spokesperson, a senior officer named Rodriguez, steps forward. "What happened with Brennan isn't isolated," she says, her voice hushed despite the empty garage. "Some of us have been documenting misconduct for years, but had nowhere to take it." She hands him a thick folder. "This is evidence of systematic racial profiling, falsified reports, and quota pressures coming from command staff, including Reynolds." The folder contains dozens of internal emails, text messages, and handwritten notes documenting how officers were pressured to increase stops in minority neighborhoods while avoiding certain upscale areas, regardless of violations. Several messages come directly from Reynolds' office. "Why come forward now?" Marcus asks, studying their faces in the dim light. "Because you didn't just talk about change," Rodriguez answers, the others nodding in agreement. "You stood your ground. You put yourself at risk. That means something." The realization crashes over Marcus. He's not alone in wanting reform. The department isn't monolithic. There are allies within the system ready to help dismantle its worst elements, officers who entered law enforcement with the same ideals he once had. As the small group huddles in the cold garage discussing next steps, Marcus understands this is the true turning point. Not a confrontation between a commissioner and a racist officer, but the beginning of a coalition powerful enough to challenge entrenched institutional racism from within. For the first time since finding those threatening photos of his family, Marcus feels something close to hope. The path forward isn't about one man's crusade. It's about building enough collective power that the system can no longer protect itself from accountability. 6 months later, camera flashes illuminate the podium where Marcus stands beside the mayor. Behind them, a massive screen displays dramatic statistical changes. Traffic stops down 40%, while serious crime arrests have increased 12%. Civilian complaints down 60%. officer retention up in precincts with the highest minority populations. The Metropolitan Police Department is becoming a national model for equitable policing, the mayor announces to the assembled press corps, her political instincts allowing her to take credit for reforms she initially resisted. Marcus doesn't mind. Results matter more than recognition. Charts and graphs tell a story of transformation. Body camera compliance at 98%. Use of force incidents decreased by half. Response times improved across all neighborhoods, regardless of demographic makeup. Numbers that represent real lives improved, real dignity restored. After the press conference, Officer Rodriguez, now Captain Rodriguez, heading the newly created Accountability Division, approaches with an update. Her uniform gleams with purpose, her confidence a stark contrast to the furtive whistleblower from the parking garage. Reynolds took early retirement rather than face the ethics investigation, she reports with subtle satisfaction. His pension was reduced, but he avoided criminal charges, and Brennan completes his retraining program next week. Marcus raises an eyebrow. And you think he's changed? Rodriguez shrugs. His performance metrics show improvement. His language has improved, but what's in his heart? She shakes her head. Some will never change, but the system has, which means he can't operate the old way anymore. This acknowledgement of imperfect progress feels more honest than any fairy tale ending. Not every officer embraced the new direction. 28 resigned, rather than adapt to new standards. Others go through the motions, following procedures without changing their hearts. But actions matter more than intentions when public safety is at stake. That evening, Marcus attends a community dialogue session at a local recreation center. The room is divided, citizens on one side, officers on the other. But the invisible barrier between them is slowly dissolving through structured conversations. The discussions are sometimes heated, often uncomfortable, but necessary. Shanice facilitates today's session, her organization now a formal partner with the department. The goal isn't for everyone to agree, she reminds the group. The goal is to hear each other. During a break, Marcus finds himself beside Shanice at the refreshment table. We've made progress, he admits, stirring his coffee. But there's still so far to go. 3 years isn't enough to undo centuries, Shanice agrees, her voice low. But it's a start. A young officer approaches them hesitantly. Officer Chen, fresh from the academy, wearing the newly designed uniform with its prominently displayed body camera. Commissioner Ms. Taylor, I wanted to thank you both, she says, voice steady despite her nervousness. I nearly quit the academy when I saw how things really worked. Now I feel like I can actually make the difference I signed up for. After she leaves, Shanice turns to Marcus. That's how change sustains itself, through the next generation doing better than we did. Later, driving home, Marcus is pulled over again. Despite his position, his heart still pounds from ingrained anxiety, the bodily memory of countless stops over decades. But this time, the young officer immediately identifies himself and states the reason, a broken tail light, before requesting documentation. He remains respectful throughout, maintaining proper distance, keeping his hands visible. No power play, no intimidation, just procedural professionalism. As Marcus drives away with a fix-it ticket, he reflects on the complex nature of progress. The department hasn't been magically cured of racism. The structures that protected and promoted discriminatory practices took generations to build and won't be dismantled overnight. Yet meaningful change has begun. Body cameras record every interaction. Data analysis exposes patterns of bias. Community oversight provides real accountability. The recruiting class is the most diverse in department history, and a new generation of officers is being trained with different expectations from the beginning. At home, Marcus opens his desk drawer and finds the anonymous threat photos sent months earlier. He kept them as a reminder of what he's fighting against. Next to them, he places a new picture, himself with a diverse command staff, implementing reforms that were once considered impossible. The transformation isn't complete. It never will be in his lifetime. But systems can change when enough people within them refuse to perpetuate injustice, even knowing that progress will be imperfect, resistance fierce, and victory incremental. The question isn't whether one confrontation between a commissioner and a racist officer can fix a broken system. It's whether that moment can catalyze a movement that continues long after both men have left the department. And the deeper question remains for all of us watching. In systems built on historical inequality, is change from within truly possible? Or does meaningful justice require dismantling and rebuilding from the ground up? The answer perhaps lies not in grand gestures or perfect solutions, but in the countless daily choices of those with the courage to try, and in our willingness to demand more than symbolic victories in the long struggle toward true equality.